Hi there, my name's Case Henskins and I work for the Southern Influence. Brian, Chris, and Ariel have already talked to you a little bit about the production process, and I'm going to be going over more of the post-production process today. In this course, we will go over organization and importing, selecting footage, sequence settings, exporting, and delivering to the client. One of the most important things about the post-production process is organization, and that really starts with a solid folder structure. The way we like to have our folders laid out is probably pretty similar to how most post houses do it, but we have a folder for footage, one for our audio, one for music, graphics, and then another folder for anything else that you might need for this project, such as like an After Effects folder that has some of your more advanced graphics in it. Staying organized is really important for a couple of reasons. One, it will make your job much easier when you're actually doing the editing, and then it will really help if there's multiple people working on a project, because then everybody stays on the same page and all of the folder structure will be maintained when it switches from one computer, from one person's workstation to the other. It really takes all the guesswork out of, well, where did they put the footage? Where did they put this clip, the B-roll? It's important to kind of set up a standard operating procedure for you and your team, so that way you all do, in fact, stay on the same page. And now I'll show you a quick example of how we set up our folders here at the Southern Influence. Okay, so here is kind of where we like to start, obviously in a Finder window. We'll go ahead and set up our folder structure. We have one for footage already. We typically like to have one for audio, one for graphics, shorthand GFX, one for music, and then depending on your project, you may have different folders. Like you may have one for an After Effects project if it's going to be a little bit more advanced. So once we have all of our folders created, we can actually go ahead and open up a Premiere project. Okay, so Premiere is open, and before I import anything into Premiere, it's really good practice to put all of these folders into an actual project folder, so that way anybody that may take over working on this after we start it, you just got to give them this one project folder, and then everything inside is going to stay the same. So we've got Premiere open here. I'm going to go ahead and start a new project. And the first thing you want to do is say where you're going to save this project. So I'll go ahead and come up here to project location, browse to my selected hard drive, and save it in the project folder. Double clicking allows you to select it. Premiere will give you these videos here if you want to try to make something with their provided assets, but we don't want to do that. So now that we've selected where we're going to be saving this, we need to give it a name, and we'll call it Product Shoot for now. And then we can go down here to create. Okay, so this is my personalized setup for Premiere. In order to change that, it's pretty easy. You can go up to Window, Workspaces, and there's some sample ones here, like one for color, where the windows will be laid out if you're doing color correction. Editing is a pretty normal one, Essentials, but I have my own one here that I like to use with my own setup. So I'll just go ahead and leave that for now. Bring this up here actually. Okay, so now that my Premiere window is open, there's a couple of ways you can import your media to start. The way I do it is I just open up my Finder window and basically grab all of the folders that I'll be using, drag them and drop them. It'll take a second to import. Okay, so now my folders are imported. Sometimes if there's nothing in your folders when you drag and drop them into Premiere, they may not actually populate, so just keep that in mind. It's not like you're missing anything. So that's the way I like to do it, but like anything in Premiere, there's usually a couple hundred different ways to do something. You can come up here and do File, Import if you'd like. You can also just right click in here and import. Alternatively, if you want to set up your bin structure a little differently, you can click the new bin icon here and then drag and drop the files in there directly. Now that we've got all of our footage imported into our project, it's time to actually start looking at the footage that we've imported. Everyone's different, but the way I like to do it is put all of my footage in a timeline sequence and then go through each individual clip and make selects as to which ones I think might be the best. Okay, I went ahead and opened up my footage bin here. You can do that by expanding the little caret on the side. And we want to go ahead and create a new sequence. Again, there's multiple ways to do this, but the way I prefer to do it is click the first file, hold down Shift, click the last file, and then you can drag those over to where the timeline would be, and that will automatically generate a sequence for us. Premiere defaults by naming the sequence whatever the first clip was. I obviously don't like that, so I'm going to call this selects. The sequence typically shows up inside the bin with the footage. You can move that out if you like, or you can just leave it for now. I'll go ahead and leave it. The next thing we want to do once our sequence is set up is to check our sequence settings to make sure it's set up for success. You do that by right-clicking on your sequence and then clicking Sequence Settings. There's a ton of information in here, and most of it will be left unchanged. The time base is automatically based on that first clip that you dragged in, and so it was 24 FIPS or 23.976 to be exact. The frame size is 4K because that's what we shot in. So this is defaulted to 4K because that's what our footage is, but since this is going to be edited for social, we want to change this from this default dimension to 1080 by 1920. And so that there you can see makes it 9:16. Everything else is okay. We can leave it as is for now, and then click OK. And then you'll get a message saying that this will change the preview size. That's fine. So as you can see in my program monitor here, it gave us a frame size that is now, a social size. Okay, so as you can see here in our program monitor, since we adjusted our frame size, there's a lot that's cut off. Pretty easy way to fix this. You can select the first clip, come on up here to Effect Controls, and keep in mind this may be in a different place for you, but when you're looking for something, you can always come to Window, and if you don't see a check, that means it's not actually in your Premiere project. So this one is Effect Controls, obviously. Since we shot this vertical, we need to make sure our footage mimics that. So we can come in here. What's great about Premiere is you can drag these parameters, but just to be a little bit more precise, you can click in there and enter in the value directly. So -90 should turn this the way we want it. And then now that it's rotated properly, we can come up to scale. Again, you can kind of slide this to fit your desired preference, but since it's 4K, we can just say 50% scale, and that will fill up the frame entirely. It would be a pain in the butt to go through and do this to every single one of them. So now we can grab this, copy our motion, and then highlight the rest of our clips, and we should be able to paste those parameters on there directly. Yeah, so I'm just going through real quick, scrubbing to make sure that all worked okay, and it looks pretty good to me. So now that our footage is unified and everything's looking the same, we can actually go through and start the editing process. We can scrub through our timeline and pick out our favorite shots. You can do this by dragging the playhead. Alternatively, you can use the up and down arrow keys to navigate through your timeline. Okay, so now I'm just going to start going through these. I like to use the arrow keys to navigate to the specific clips, but let's just start with the first one and give this a play here. Since it's a long clip, I like to kind of just scrub to get to the beginning of the action here. Take a look. Yeah, that's a good one. So this is my personal preference. When I like a clip, I just go ahead and drag it up so it is differentiated from the rest of the timeline. I'll just go through the rest of these and see if there's anything else we like. All right, so then I'll just go ahead and zoom back out and just like to check my shots. Yep. Like all these. Perfect. Now we can move on to the next part. Okay, so just to kind of keep us organized, since we're working on some different videos here, I've got my selects in my select sequence. Kind of the best way to do this, in my mind, is to duplicate my sequence, rename it, and call this drink pouring. Open that up, and then basically just delete all the ones that aren't drink pouring. And that's pretty easy because we pulled out the ones that we know we need. So I'll just go ahead and delete the ones that have not been dragged up. So I got the drink pouring here, not drink pouring. So we'll go ahead and delete that one. Drink pouring, Bala, and drink pouring. Cool. So now I've got my 3 clips that I want to use for this drink pouring. And then I'll go back to selects, duplicate this again, and call this one Can Stand Alone. And again, I just literally need the one clip from this one. I know it's this one, so I can delete the rest. And now this sequence is set up. Do it one last time for the Bala. Double click that to open it, and my Bala blocks is the second to last one. So just delete everything else we don't need. And I can drag this towards the beginning just to keep it organized. So now we have our project all set up and organized, and in the next lesson, Brian will go through each shot and show you some more in-depth editing tricks for each clip. Once you're ready to show the video to the client, it's time to export. And for the sake of this video, we're gonna keep it pretty simple, but let's go ahead and take a look at some export settings now. So when you're actually ready to export, it's a good idea to set your in and your out. Now keep in mind, Brian hasn't tweaked these yet, so this is just more of a mock export. Again, there's a couple of ways to do your exporting. You can come up to File, Export, Media. Alternatively, you can do Command M, which is the default short key, and this opens up your export window. Just a fun fact here, you're still in Premiere, so if you're like, hey, where did my Premiere editing screen go? That's just right up here, so you can kind of come back and toggle when you're ready. So this is the export window, and we'll just go through some quick settings here. For the majority of your exports for web, you will use H.264 for your codec format. There's a bunch of different ones in here. I'm sure these are all useful for specific use cases, but we almost always use H.264, sometimes QuickTime MOV, but we'll leave that as it is for now. And this basically just creates an MP4 that's largely compatible across all social media platforms. It gives you a really high quality video that isn't too large in file size, so it's almost always perfect for our uses. From here, we can double check our export resolution, which is in video. We can just kind of twirl that little caret down, and it matches the source by default. So you can see it's 1080 by 1920, the frame rate's the same, progressive field order, that's pretty standard, and square pixels as well. If you want to really get into the nitty gritty, you can click on more. I usually leave all of this unchanged, but for bitrate settings, that's where you'll start to see some quality adjustment changes. 15.2 is what Premiere's best guess is, like to try and match the footage, but if you want that a little higher quality, you can up it up to 30. Keep in mind that'll change your estimated file size significantly, but for this use, I think 15 is fine. As you can see, the file size went back down. Once we're happy with our settings, we want to make sure this is exporting to a place where we can find it easily. It defaults to the last place you did an export, so this was another project I was working on. So to change it, you can just click on this and navigate where you'd like on our drive, project. And just because I like to keep things organized, I typically make a new folder in here for exports, just so I know where to find them at a glance. And drink pouring's fine for the name on this. I'll go ahead and save. And once you're sure you're happy with all the settings, it's as easy as hitting export. Now that our video is exported, we can go ahead and actually send it to the client. And this can be done many different ways. You can use something free like Google Drive, or you can use a paid subscription service. We use a company called Frame.io, and this works really well for us because it allows the client to input feedback directly on the video, and it even shows the time code as to where their edit is taking place. So it virtually eliminates any sort of confusion as to what they're talking about. If you want to save some money and just be super simple, you can use Google Drive. I'm sure most of you have seen this, but I like to create a new folder and call this drink pouring. So I created my folder, open that up, and then from there, you can just drag and drop your video. Once the video is uploaded, you want to share it, and I'll do this by right-clicking on the file and clicking share. And it says I'm the owner, obviously. And if I were to copy this link and send it right now, nobody could see it because it's currently restricted. So a good way to do that is say anyone with the link, if you don't mind whoever has the link sharing it around. And then you can say you can set them as the viewer, the commenter, or the editor. I'll usually just do commenter if I want them to be able to say like, hey, looks good. And once that's done, you can copy your link and send this in an email or however else you'd get it to them. Alternatively, there's another option for sending files. We use a site called frame.io. And when you log in, typically it takes you to the last project that you worked on. So in this one, I'll go ahead and add a project. And we'll just call this drink pouring. And there's some initial settings here. I like to leave can download files on. You can change this from a file by file basis. Everything else is pretty much okay. You can allow people to comment, and you can set your notifications when they comment. You can get notified right away, which is great. Go ahead and create project, and ask me later. And as you can see, it's empty in here, so they want us to upload some files. You can do this the old-fashioned way where you upload and browse directly to, or you can drag and drop, which is much easier in my mind. And now that it's uploading, it's going to generate thumbnails, so you can tell kind of at a glance what you're looking at. And now we want to be able to share this with the client. So pretty similar to Google Drive, you right click on it, share. And there's two options here. Share for review is if you're still in the middle of the editing process. This allows you and your client to go back and forth with revisions, or you can share it as a presentation, which gives you a much more kind of polished link that you can share kind of as a final. So we'll go ahead and click share for review. A new window will pop up, and like Google Drive, you'll get a link here. You can set the privacy. And it's important to go over to settings, and if you want them to be able to download, you want to turn this on. Otherwise, by default, it is off. I like to actually leave this off so that way the client can't download an unfinished file and share something that wasn't meant to be seen by other stakeholders. But once you're happy with those settings, you can come back to sharing and copy your link. You can also enter in somebody's email address directly, and they'll be notified via email that somebody shared something with them from Frame. So once you have your link copied, you can exit out and send it in an email just like you would any other link. We also like to use Frame because they offer something called version stacking. And this is really handy because once the client has inputted all their feedback on version 1, you can take that, apply it to version 2, and then automatically it stacks onto version 1, and the link is preserved. The client can actually use the same link we sent them initially and see automatically the new version. So it really kind of gets rid of any confusion as to, wait, was the client looking at the first draft or the second draft, and everybody stays on the same page. As a reminder, when you end up working on client revisions, it's a really good idea to duplicate your sequence so that way you're preserving the old version so that way you can go back to it and cross-reference if need be. So now that the client has seen the V1 of the drink pouring video, they have some revisions. It's a good idea to duplicate your drink pouring and add V2 at the end, or the date, or however you differentiate versions. And then you can make all of your changes. Say they're like, well, I really liked the bit of the can dripping, but I didn't like the guy's hand in there. Well, obviously we'll go ahead and cut that out. So now any changes that are made are going to be done to our V2, and then our drink pouring V1 is still preserved just in case they change their mind. And it's a good idea just to kind of cross-reference what has been changed. Thanks so much for watching this course on organizing and prepping the edit. In the next video, we'll go over some more fine-tune editing techniques. Thanks so much.